Marine organisms here. So things that live in the ocean. And we go from simplest to most complex, or most primitive, what was on Earth a long time ago, to most recent. And that's left to right on this chart. So the first animals that ever existed were sponges, porifera. Porifera is the name of the phylum. If you remember biology, kingdom, phylum, class, order, it's the way they organize the different species. And so the poriferans were the first, the oldest, the sponges. And then the cnidarians, that's how you pronounce that, cnidaria. Those are jellyfish, corals, sea anemones. I like to say sea anemone. You ever heard of those? The comb jellies, we aren't too concerned with those, but we'll look at them. The flatworms, the ribbon worms, the peanut worms. A lot of different types of worms out there. And then the mollusks. Y'all know mollusks? Y'all ever heard of them? Not coal mollusks. But pretty much anything that has a shell out there is a mollusk. Like oysters, clams, scallops, mussels. Those real hard shells that you find at the beach, they're all made by mollusks.
Hey, what was a squid? Was a squid a mollusk that had a shell in there?
Yeah, a squid is a mollusk that doesn't have a shell. Mm-hmm. And so is an octopus. Squid actually has kind of a reduced shell on the inside, but we'll talk more about that later. The echidurians, I can't even pronounce it. They're so rare. We don't talk much about those. And then the segmented worms, there's a lot of those at the beach. The arthropods, which includes crabs and lobsters. Also the insects, but we'll be more concerned with the crustaceans, which live in the ocean. The little nematodes, little roundworms. The phoranids. Probably haven't heard much of those, but they're related to starfish. And the bryozoans, and the lamp shells, and the arrow worms, and then the starfish. That's kind of a group in its own. We'll talk about that for a day or two. The hemichordates, and finally the chordates, which include fish, amphibians and reptiles and birds and mammals, all in this group right here. So we're going to run through all that in the next 3 chapters, and that'll be about the end of the semester by the time we get through all of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And what page is it on?
On 148 is a chart.
148. Oh. Wow, what a chart. So 147 is the picture and 148 is the chart. And if you knew that chart, you'd know a lot, wouldn't you? It's the biggest chart I've ever seen. So, this chart basically summarizes the next couple of months in here. The little crab. Cute. I'm not going to let you sit here and write this. I'm just going to turn to the pictures. And you'll have to read about these things. Here we go. This is the first one I wanted to show you. This is on top of 116. Are you, I'm just wondering, are you like close up or are you back?
And I can see you and the screen.
Why don't you go close up on the screen for this one? This is the sponge, the peripherin. And sponges have just this body that has holes in it, and sponges are filter feeders. And so they have little pores in their walls of their body, and they have special cells lining the inside of their body. They're called collar cells. See those little cells right there? And there's a close-up of a collar cell, also called a choanocyte. Doesn't it look like it has a turtleneck collar? That's why they call it a collar cell. And it's got a flagellum on it, which is a tail. And the flagellum beats back and forth and draws water into the body of the sponge. And the water is drawn in through little cells called pore cells. Pore cell. Joke. Do you get it? Pore cell. Anyway. So the water gets sucked in this way, and then it goes up and out of the top of the sponge. And the hole in the top of the sponge is called the osculum. So water goes in and out. Why would a sponge want to do such a thing?
To filter feed.
Food, that's how it eats. Food comes in, and these pore cells have a way of trapping the food. So any little food particle gets stuck in here and gets absorbed by the cells. And there's other cells crawling around in the body of the sponge called amoebocytes, or wandering cells. They look like amoebas, if you ever remember amoebas from regular biology. And they crawl around and they take food from the pore cells and they deliver the food to all the other cells. Like all of these collar cells get a food delivery from the wandering cells.
It says in the book that water goes into the pore cells and the food is taken up through the collar cells.
Oh, it says the collar cells get the food? Huh. Well, there you go. I think the pore cells get food too. Maybe not. I may be wrong. Anyway, somehow food gets into the body of the organism. The amoebocytes, these wandering cells, will move food from one cell to another. There are other cells that line the outside of the sponge, pinacocytes. They're kind of protective cells that line the outside of the sponge, and if the sponge feels threatened, the pinacocyte can cover up the pore cell. Can reach out and cover the pores so the sponge quits taking in materials. And the amoebocytes will feed those pinacocytes. And the amoebocytes, the wandering cells, will also make sperms and eggs for the sponge. Sponges will reproduce sexually. They'll have sponge sex. It's not spores. They'll release sperm into the water, and the sperm will float out the top and will float to another sponge, and the other sponge will take up the sperm. And the amoebocytes can also make eggs. So the sperm fertilizes the egg in the next sponge. And then the sponge will release the fertilized egg, and the fertilized egg will float out and become a new sponge somewhere. Another thing sponges have are spicules, little pointy structures that are tough. And they come in a variety of shapes, which it shows here. And it makes the body of the sponge hard in some cases. Lots of sponges have a real hard body. And so it's kind of like the spicules are kind of like the skeleton of the sponge. And sometimes they're so hard that, like a fish or something, can't eat the sponge. So the sponge just sits there doing its filter feeding, and it's been able to survive for millions of years doing that. These sponges first appeared on the ocean floor maybe 600 million years ago, and they're still there. I guess you're right, it shows food particles here being pulled up into the collar cell. See food particle? So I guess the collar cells get food. This shows the way a different sponge looks. Instead of having one wide open body, it has several smaller chambers inside of it. Sponges have different looks to them. And sometimes in the middle of a sponge here, you have a material that's soft. It's called spongin. And they don't show this. They don't show it on the diagram here. Spongin is a soft material that sometimes fills the body of a sponge. Some sponges are soft, and some are harder. I have a couple bath sponges in the other room. I'll show you. They're soft. First, I'll let you watch a sponge video.
In the bottom of the sea.
That's a terrible sponge video. I'm not watching it. Sponges.
In the survey of the animal kingdom that follows, we will begin with the phylum of sponges. Of all the animal phyla, sponges are considered to be the simplest, primarily because they do not have tissues and so lack nerves and muscles. As a result, sponges follow pretty uncomplicated lives attached to rocks and logs. The scientific name for the sponge phylum is Porifera, which means pore bearers. They were given this name because all sponges are perforated with countless tiny pores, and this is why their dried skeletons absorb water so well. Living sponges continually take water in through their pores and then expel it back outside through a much larger opening. During this process, called filter feeding, special cells inside the sponge's body trap tiny organisms that it uses for food.
I got my sponges. Wasn't that an exciting video? These are a couple of bath sponges, and I'm going to pass them around. Bath sponges. Just let you feel them. And all of that is spongin. All the cells are dead and gone, and you're just left with the spongin, which is the soft stuff I showed you. They people used to bathe with those sponges before they make the plastic sponges that you find nowadays, that you bathe with or wash dishes with.
Sponges are the oldest living animals. The earliest sponges appeared well over 500 million years ago, before animal diversity flourished in the Cambrian period. Sponges were clinging to the seafloor long before animals had eyes or reproduced sexually, and before the earliest predators emerged, radically changing the requirements for survival. Many sponges are now toxic to fish that would otherwise prey on them. Some, however, find them a haven.
The ocean floor used to be covered with sponges. And then fish evolved and started eating the sponges. And so all the sponges died out except for the ones that happened to be poisonous. There's a sponge. A yellow tube sponge. SpongeBob!
Regan!
Aye, Captain!
I can hear you!
Captain!
Oh! Who lives in a pineapple under the sea? And served in yellow and porous is he. It's nothing but nonsense, be something you wish. Then drop on the deck and flop like a fish. SpongeBob SquarePants, SpongeBob SquarePants, SpongeBob SquarePants, SpongeBob
Yay, SpongeBob. Nautical nonsense be something I wish. I'm not letting you see that. Ooh, here's some more pictures of sponges. Anyone here dive and snorkel? You ever seen sponges?
There's the big, like, pink ones that have, like, giant osculums.
Yeah.
And there's always, like, little shrimp or fish inside of them.
I think I've seen them, I'm not really sure.
Yeah, they're pretty prevalent on coral reefs and stuff. Those are cool ones, purple.
You see big ones like that a lot. Like
Yeah.
diving.
Sometimes they just have weird shapes like this. They're not really very organized. They just grow wherever they can, grow bigger. And SpongeBob! Check this out. You can take a sponge and you can rub it up against a screen, and pieces of the sponge will fall off and will move back together to reform sponges.
Can we do that? Can we do that?
If we had a living sponge,
You should order.
you have to do this underwater now. This will be in the water here.
You should order one.
What we need to find is a video where we can see it happening. It would be nice to do. Not all sponges do that, only certain types of sponges. You know what that is? That cloud of stuff is?
Sperm.
It's sponge sperm.
Oh.
And see, that'll float around. There's trillions of sperm cells there, and they'll float around, and if the sponge is lucky, one of the sperm will float into the sponge further away.
Do they just, like, excrete it?
That's right, those little amoebocytes.
Yeah, but do they do it randomly?
No, they do it at certain times. And it often depends on the tides. They'll all do it at the same time, like at high tide or the spring tide. So that they're doing it at the same time. We call that spawning, when you release all your sperm into the water. Spawning. It's a form of external fertilization. And so here's a sperm swimming into a sponge, and there's the egg inside the sponge's body, you see. And then the sperm will fertilize the egg there. And then the egg will grow into an embryo that has many cells. And the embryo will grow into a larval form that has a bunch of cilia on its surface. Cilia are little hairs. So this larval form can swim. And the larval form will swim out of the sponge and land somewhere and grow into an adult. You can see these sponge larval forms when we're going to tow a plankton net. A plankton net is a net that you can pull through the water, and the holes in the net are so small it'll trap these little sponge larvae.
See 'em?
Yeah, we'll look at them. Sometimes if you catch them, you can see them. Sometimes you don't catch them. But we'll catch a whole bunch of different things. And a lot of the things we catch with those plankton nets are babies, little larvae of different organisms. Sometimes it's shrimp larvae or crab larvae or sponge larvae.
Can you tell?
Yeah, they have different looks to them. So that's the thing we have coming up in a week or two. We're going to drag plankton nets. Do you know what we call little creatures floating around in the ocean? Little tiny creatures floating around in the ocean?
Plankton.
Plankton. Okay, so pages 116 and 117 are basically talking about sponges. Let's go to, and 118. Let's look at 119 and 120 and 121. They're talking about cnidarians. Cnidarians are the next most complicated organism that we see in the ocean. Their bodies are more organized. They have two layers of tissues. They have an outer layer and an inner layer. And you can see them diagrammed here in this sectional view. The outer layer is blue and the inner layer is tan. Now that's false color. It's not really different colors. They're really both kind of clear colored in a lot of these organisms. Think of a jellyfish, you can almost see through it. But it has two, what we call tissue layers, an outer layer and an inner layer. The outer layer is called epidermis. And the inner layer is gastrodermis. And in between the outer layer and the inner layer, you have a jelly layer, which is called mesoglia. And the jelly layer is not living cells, it's just jelly. Are you hanging with me here, T-Ray?
Yep.
And so, an outer layer, a jelly layer, and an inner layer is what you end up with the jelly layer not being alive. There are two forms of cnidarians. There's the medusa form, which it shows on top, which looks like an umbrella with tentacles hanging down. And then there's the polyp form, which it shows on the bottom, which looks kind of like a cup with, like a coffee mug or something, with tentacles pointing up out of it. Jellyfish are all medusa form as adults. And sea anemones and corals are polyp form as adults. Tomorrow in the lab we're going to dissect one of these, a sea anemone. Ever done that before? It's dead, but you'll be able to look at its parts up close. We do a lot of dissections in marine biology. I don't know if you know that. You'll have to get used to cutting up organisms a little bit. No! The mouth is on the top side or the underside. You see the mouth there. And what they'll do is they'll pull food in. A jellyfish will sting its food. All of these tentacles are lined with special stinging cells. The stinging cells are called cnidocytes. I'll write that on the board for you. Cnidocytes. That's where it gets its name, cnidarian. Are you following me here, Trey, on the board where I'm writing this? Cnidocyte. You got that pointed at? A cnidocyte is a stinging cell. And the tentacles are covered with them. And sometimes the body is covered with them too. Like some jellyfish, this part right here is called the bell. And the bell can be covered with stinging cells. And these cells have a little harpoon in them. And if you touch the tentacle, it'll shoot these harpoons into your skin. And And they're tiny. I mean, it'll shoot thousands of them into your skin. And each little harpoon might have a poison in it too, depending on the species. How many here have been hit by a jellyfish? Feels tingly, doesn't it? It hurts. Oh, those are, yeah, that's the same related to
He had
it.
scars for like 6 years.
Yeah. They'll stick, those things stick in you and then inject poison and it hurts. Now, if it does it to a real small fish, it'll kill it. But you're too big for it to kill, so it just hurts. And so what they'll do is they'll sting a small fish and kill it or paralyze it, and then pull it into their mouth. And this mouth here will open over something large, and it takes it in, and then the fish will be inside of it, and it'll release digestive enzymes and such that digest the organism while it's in that gastrodermis in here.
So the fish just like chills inside of it until it...
Yeah, it's dead inside of it. Yeah, it dies inside of it as its body is consumed.
Can you like see fish inside of jellyfish?
Yeah, you could if you caught them at the right time. A lot of times they're stinging things smaller and eating things a lot smaller than a big fish. It depends on the jellyfish. Some jellyfish will eat big fish. Some will only eat real little things. Yes?
Does sea anemone also do those stings too?
Yeah, sea anemones have stings too. Every one of these organisms, almost every one of these organisms has stings.
But how does clownfish actually live in there?
Because the clownfish is immune to the sting. It doesn't feel it. It's not affected by it. And so the clownfish lives amongst the tentacles of the sea anemone, and nothing will come after the clownfish because it'll get stung. So that's a good place for the clownfish. Anything that can't be digested is let back out of the mouth. So it only has one opening. It has a mouth where food goes in and food comes back out. The waste comes back out the mouth. So it has what we call a sac-like body plan, where it's like a sac, where there's only one hole in a sac. Stuff goes in and out the same hole. There's an up-close view of the stinger, of the stinging cell. This is the cell right here, and this is the harpoon that comes out of it. And it's got a long rope that it's attached to. This harpoon has a long rope it's attached to. And you can see the rope all coiled up there. It's not a rope, it's a line, it's a filament. But this harpoon can shoot out pretty far. I mean, it might only be that far, but the little cell is microscopic. So if it has a line that's that long, that's thousands of times longer than the cell itself.
What's the difference between a nematocyte and a neocyte?
The neocyte is the cell, and the nematocyst is the stinger. It's called a nematocyst. Is that what it's saying? The nematocyst is the stinger, and the neocyte is the cell that holds the stinger. This shows how a jellyfish reproduce. You ready for some jellyfish sex?
Bring it on.
Here's the male jellyfish. The medusa is what it's called when it's shaped like this. And it releases sperm into the water. And the female will release eggs into the water. And the sperm will fertilize the eggs. And then while it's floating around in the water, it'll multiply and become this larval form called a planula. And that's lined with cilia, and that'll swim around. We'll sometimes catch those in our plankton nets too. That larval form right there will be caught in our plankton nets. But that larval form will swim around in the ocean and eventually land somewhere. And will grow into a colony that looks like this. And there's a close-up of it looks like a little plant with a bunch of spiders on it. But it's not a plant with a bunch of spiders on it. It's got a polyp, and that will feed and take in food. And every once in a while, a little medusa will bud off of this thing. You see it says medusa buds? It'll release little pieces of it that grow bigger and bigger and grow into jellyfish.
So sea anemones and medusa jellyfish come off of the same thing? Because isn't a polyp an anemone?
Yeah, polyp's like an anemone, but it's not actually an anemone. It's just the polyp form. This is the polyp. So jellyfish have two life forms. They have their adult form that looks like this, that swims around in the ocean, and then they have like a second life that looks like this, that's stuck to the bottom. And this little thing that looks like a plant might pop off 1,000 jellyfish. Or 10,000. Just, they can keep popping these things off until a fish or something comes and eats it. Mm-hmm. You probably didn't know that about jellyfish. That's what this class is for, learning stuff. We have fun. There's a jellyfish. Another jellyfish. You want to see a scary jellyfish video?
A few.
That's not a scary jellyfish video. This is a scary jellyfish video.
Most jellyfish drift throughout their adult life. Descendants of the earliest predators, jellyfish evolved stinging cells coiled inside their tentacles. To avoid incurring serious damage, they must subdue large prey quickly. Some species fire their microscopic barbs in less than 3 milliseconds, with an acceleration 40,000 times that of gravity. Cells are triggered only by touch or chemical contact. Just how? Science cannot yet explain.
Now, some of these creatures take algae in to live with them. Let me back this up a little bit. Where is it? SpongeBob! Why am I going way back here? Sorry. Losing. Here we go. A lot of these creatures can have algae lining the edges of the gastrodermis here, or living on kind of on top here. And so they'll do both. They'll do photosynthesis. They'll make their own food. And they'll also catch food. The algae that's on them will do photosynthesis, you see. And so, you especially see that in coral. Have you ever heard of coral before? Coral always have algae living with them. Oh, hey, I took that picture walking along the beach not too long ago. Thousands of jellyfish washed up. And that was as far as the eye could see. You ought to go walking on the beach as much as possible. You see a lot of these things. Anyway, oh, there's a sea anemone. I just like to say the word sea anemone. That's what we're going to dissect tomorrow. And hopefully under the microscope you'll be able to see some stinging cells. I'm not sure if we can or not, but we'll try. So the coral, what I was saying about the coral, the coral, what they do is they have algae algae living with them. And the algae can make food from the sun. And then the algae give the coral some of the food. And in exchange, the coral give the algae a place to live and protect them. So it's a mutualistic relationship. Symbiosis, yeah. Each coral polyp will build a little shell around itself. And so I'm going to pass this around. I want you to look at it and notice how there's little chambers, little tiny chambers. Each one of them holds a little tiny coral polyp. And they make these huge formations. The coral can live in such great numbers that they make what's called a coral reef, with literally miles and miles of this stuff all along the ocean. Shells that the coral live in, and the little coral polyps can reach up and feed, and then can dive back down in their shells. I got tons of this stuff. This is called brain coral right here. See how it looks like a brain? And this is a red-colored coral. They'll come in different colors. I just want you to notice the little holes. It feels like rock. It's heavy. It's a different kind of coral that's... Look at this. This is one of my favorites. Oh, it's real. Yeah, this is real.
Making sure.
It's the shell of a coral. Now the coral's all dead that was inside of it, but the shell remains. And this coral will break off and wash on shore in islands that are near coral reefs. We have a coral reef offshore around here. Did y'all know that?
Gray's Reef.
Gray's Reef. It's about 30 miles offshore. Big coral reef. You always find coral in shallow waters. Can anyone guess why?
Photosynthesis.
That's the light can only go down so far, and they have the algae living in their bodies. And so in the daytime, they're doing photosynthesis, and then at night, those polyps come out and catch food.
Do people dive there?
Yeah, people dive, yeah. All the time at Gray's Reef. You can take an excursion out there. I've never been out there, but I've heard it's really good.
Gray's Reef.
Have you ever gone fishing out there? Yeah, they have big fish. Whenever you find a coral reef, you have big fish, because there's little fish eating the coral, and then the big fish eat the little fish.
It's 32 miles straight that way.
How many
It's like
miles?
32.
32, yeah.
An hour.
I'll show you this video after we get done passing this around of David Attenborough diving amongst some
I
coral.
went out there with somebody.
It's Naomi, you got that backwards. The corals are actually on the brain,
I know,
side
in
that looks
the
like a
hole.
brain. Yeah,
I was looking in the hole.
yeah. It'll grow just bigger and bigger every year. New corals settle on top of the old ones. And so the thicker the coral mass is, the older it is.
Does the coral on the inside die?
Yeah, the coral on the inside will die. Let me show you something. Imagine a coral reef under the water that's kind of varies in its size. Here's the surface of the ocean. Here's the surface of the ocean. Here's the coral. What would happen, do y'all think, if the bottom of the ocean were pushed up by plate tectonics?
The coral would grow higher.
The coral would go above the surface of the water, and so you might have something that looks kind of like this, ocean with coral above the surface of the ocean. Well, all that coral is going to dry out and die, and you'll just be left with the coral. That's an island. There are islands completely made of coral as their substrate. And then, plants and stuff start to grow on it, soil forms. But underneath the soil, the islands are all coral. All those Caribbean islands are like that. They're all coral islands. And down there where the little islands are on the Keys, they're all coral islands. So these are giant structures that can...
The Great Barrier Reef, Australia. At night, I'm surrounded by corals. They do look extraordinarily like plants, branching into fans and twigs and bushes. At night, the similarity is particularly marked. All over their stony surface, tiny buds open into what look like flowers. Like plants, must have light. They can't grow if the water is cloudy or the depth so great that the rays of the sun can't reach it. And these resemblances are not just coincidences. If I go back underwater now that it's day and the sun is up, I shall see that many of these corals are feeding in a way that is not like animals at all, a way that is quite different. Is even more obvious. The tiny rosettes of groping arms have withdrawn into their stony sockets on the surface of the coral skeleton, but they're still within the reach of sunlight. And within their tiny bodies are microscopic green plants, algae, and they're feeding by making starches and sugars. Feeding too. They have partly digested the walls of these captive plants and